Coming up today, Chad Wolf and I will talk with legendary football coach and all-around great guy, Lou Holtz, to discuss a range of topics from men and women's sports to leadership principles to life lessons that have and will impact generations and, of course, coaching America back to greatness. Welcome to The Tank.
Coming to you from our nation's capital, this is The Tank, your voice in Washington, D.C. and around the country. Broadcasting from the America First Policy Institute offices in D.C., this is the premier think tank podcast where we discuss the challenges facing our nation, talk policy, and advance America First solutions. Welcome to The Tank.
Hello, this is Chad Wolf.
And this is Hogan Gidley.
Coming up, we're going to sit down with legendary coach Lou Holtz. But first, Hogan and I are going to talk about some of the hot topics that everyday Americans care about.
Yeah, and Chad, I want to start it here because one of the most important, impactful issues we're facing right now in this country has to deal with an issue that you really have been at the forefront of helping to shape in the last administration, but also currently, and that's the southern border. You ran the Department of Homeland Security, of course, and you've done so much work on this, been down the border dozens of times. In fact, you testified last week before Congress, and always fun to watch those exchanges with people who understand truth and reality versus those who are trying to cover for policies that have really hurt the American people at every turn. But H.R. 2, a bill that deals with the southern border, has passed Congress, and so a lot of things going on in that space. And one of the issues you pointed out that's so problematic down there is that we've had 4.5 million illegal aliens come into this country under this administration, 1.5 million gotaways, ones that just escape into our communities without the government knowing or contacting. That's 6 million people, and of course that's a population larger than every single major U.S. city, except, of course, New York. It's a massive problem. Over 200 known or suspected terrorists apprehended at the southern border. So clearly it's open. Clearly it is a boon for drug cartels who utilize and brutalize women, men, children to run their drugs into this country, making the cartels billions of dollars. I've never seen this before. So talk about kind of the problem down there first, but before we get to the solutions, tell us really what's going on. You've been there so many times. You've met with border agents. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I just got back from El Paso, talking with border agents and looking at the problem. Look, I think this is an interesting issue because unlike some of the other crises that we have going on in this administration, like inflation hits everyone. So you experience it every day, whether you're filling up your gas tank, you're going into the store, you're buying goods, whatever it might be. And so people feel that. Unless you live on the border or unless you follow this issue closely, I think a lot of Americans don't feel this every day. But it is a huge issue that's impacting American communities, and it's going to have some long-term and I think devastating effects as we move forward. So you mentioned a couple of numbers there, Hogan. You know, when you've got upwards over the last 27 months, upwards of 5 million individuals coming into this country illegally, the vast majority of them staying in this country, very few are being removed that are staying in this country. What happens to the public education systems, the public health systems, public safety systems? You now have an influx of individuals that you didn't plan for as a community or as a town. And so these are the long-term effects I don't think that we spend enough time talking about, right? We talk about the illegality of crossing the border illegally, and yes, that is bad. That's bad enough, and we should fix that. And you talk about just the mass chaos that it's caused. But how is it impacting everyday Americans? I think that's what we as a country and really as a movement and others should really spend a lot more time on.
But you mentioned people don't feel it every day. I think people do feel it. They may not know where it's coming from, and I think you hit on it. So, for example, when these thousands, tens of thousands of people flood into our communities, it puts a strain on the first responders, on the healthcare system, on the education system, et cetera. I think a lot of people in the media just don't cover it for a lot of reasons, in large part because they are for open borders and things like that. But I would say I think the American people are really starting to feel it. Maybe not like the economy they would. They don't see that, the cost of toothpaste goes up 20%. They see it. This is a different conversation to have, but I think they're really starting to feel it, right?
Well, I hope they are. I mean, you can't really avoid it at the end of the day. And I think the
Right.
perfect example of this is also the deadly fentanyl that's coming across our border and really is impacting almost every community, right? But if you look at the press reporting or you watch TV about fentanyl, very few times do they actually say where it's coming from, which is China,
Right.
and how it's getting to the United States, which is across that southern border. And about 90 to 95% of the cases, it's coming across that southern border because it's wide open, because of the policies that have been enacted. They don't give you that context to say, hey, we can actually do something about this. This is not just, this is life in America and we have a fentanyl crisis and everyone deal with it. Let's actually try to solve it. So that, yes, people are feeling it, but you are right. You know, the press and others don't actually tell you the whole story. So it's not that they're, lying to you per se. They're not giving you all the facts so that you can make an informed decision and really be knowledgeable about this issue overall.
As a recovering journalist, I will tell you the way that bias kind of manifests itself are twofold. One is what you decide to cover, and then two is how you decide to cover it. Like I said, if I'm not going to mention the border, people don't know about it.
Yeah.
If I do mention the fentanyl, but I don't mention China and the southern border, then of course I'm omitting something that the American people should know. I would point out too, it's frustrating when the administration says there are no policies that can fix this. We don't know what to do. First of all these crimes that are committed by someone in this country illegally and unlawfully, we got our own problems with residents committing crimes. The people who come into this country illegally and unlawfully, the DUIs, the rapes, the murders, the burglaries, the robberies, etc., they're 100% preventable because they don't have to happen.
That's right.
So I want to talk a little bit about the solutions because we know there's a problem, but we're not a think tank here in Washington, D.C. that says, hey, there's a lot of problems. Look at these problems. We also have to offer policy solutions, policy prescriptions to get these things fixed. So if you would, I know we're launching town halls this month in some border states. You can talk a little bit about that, but tell us kind of the content of what you're going to offer as solutions that we know that have been proven to work to protect the American people.
So you mentioned it in the intro. A lot of that has to do with the bill that passed the House recently called H.R. 2, which is a border security bill. And H.R. 2 being the second major piece of legislation that the House has passed, because that's the importance of what's going on that border and the solutions that we've got to find. So we talk about fixing the crisis three different ways here at America First. It's securing the border. You need to secure the border. And there's a variety of ways that you can do that, from building a border wall system to enforcing the law, remain in Mexico. There's a variety of different ways that you can do that. We talk about that. You've also got to end human trafficking. The type of humanitarian crisis that is going on the border, if folks could go down there every single day, women are getting raped on that journey. Women and children mainly, but others are dying on that journey. They're in the desert. They're on that river. Those deaths are, again, preventable, but they're also very, very difficult to see. When someone dies in the desert because of dehydration or sun exposure, it's not that the cartel members are trying to help them. They simply leave them there and keep going with the group that they have. So there's some real world effects. So it's end human trafficking, but it's also defeating the Mexican cartels. Public enemy number one should be the Mexican cartels. So whether it's the fentanyl or the human trafficking, it's originating from the Mexican cartels. And we need to be clear-eyed about that. And I there's some press reporting here probably about 6 months ago that talked about, President Trump had this, meeting in the Oval where he talked about, really going after kinetically the cartels. And somehow whoever wrote that, I think it was a CNN article, they wanted to make it be like, well, that was so outlandish. Actually, it's not. It's not outlandish to say one of the greatest threats facing Americans are the Mexican cartels, and let's be clear-eyed about some of those solutions, and let's figure that out and put everything on the table, not holding anything back. That's what you expect. None of those conversations, Hogan, are taking place today in the administration.
Yeah, and one other point I think is important to notice. I love how Congress kind of throws up their hands in these instances, say we really can't do much, or the left or the media will attack policy prescriptions that you just outlined articulately about how we can actually fix this and say you can't do those types of things. That's wrong. That's bad. But those are the laws that are on the books that you're trying to enforce too, that we tried to enforce in the previous administration, that of course aren't being followed right now. So while we're talking about policy prescriptions, some of these things that the current administration is just, they're just ignoring it. They're actually laws that Congress passed that are on the books. Talk a little bit about the lack of enforcement on some of these laws.
Well, I'll give you a couple of examples, and I think this will illustrate for listeners here. Early on in the administration did two things. I'm going to tell you, and it's kind of they're contradictory. First, they said simply crossing the border illegally is no longer grounds for removal. You breaking the law, which it is a misdemeanor the first time you do it. It then becomes a felony the second time you do it if you're prosecuted. Simply breaking the law and coming in, the DHS secretary said that is no longer grounds for us to remove you, which is crazy. You're basically saying you've broken the law. I have the ability to remove you, but I'm categorically taking a group of individuals off the playing field to say, I can't remove you. I won't allow my officers to remove you. But yet at the same time, they tell you, here are our priorities for removal. So it's terrorist, okay? It's public safety threats, and it's individuals who have crossed the border illegally. So if it's a priority, but yet you tell your officers not to remove anyone, which is it? I say that and I give that example because it's a snapshot into the life of a DHS and a Border Patrol and an ICE officer's world now under this administration. They have no idea what they actually should be doing because instead of just simply saying follow the law, enforce the law, which is very clear, they're trained on it, it's what they go to academies to do, this administration says, don't do this, but do this, but do it in this way and not that way. And so it becomes, if you're a law enforcement, that's the worst case scenario.
It's a mixed message.
You don't want to do that because now you're being second guessed.
Right.
And that's just, from a law enforcement perspective, it does not work. There's numerous examples where that does not work. But that's what they're faced with today. And that's just one example. I mean, I've got another dozen that it's all in the same vein, which is the law says this and they're doing something opposite. And so that's why this is so important of an issue, not only affecting everyday Americans and communities, but it's also about the rule of law. And if this country is one thing, it's built on the rule of law. We're unique in that sense, and no one's above it. And you got to hold people accountable. So, the hearing that you mentioned last week, I've got another one this week. We're talking about that, making sure that laws are being faithfully executed.
Speaking of bad decisions that have ramifications for people in this country, let's talk about kind of our second topic.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's a good intro. Yeah. I like that.
Well, it's about kind of how it's a regular occurrence, right, for woke businesses to make bad decisions in the name of wokeness or some other kind of nonsensical thing, and they're really destroying the businesses themselves. And it is fascinating to me to watch kind of what happened with, first it was Bud Light and their can with Dylan Mulvaney, who's a man who dresses as a woman. It led to a big national boycott of Bud Light. You saw videos of people, who had gone to grocery stores, and you see racks and racks of Bud Light and Bud Light products still in there, whereas like the Coors Light and other things are just gone.
People shooting Bud Light bottles.
People shooting Bud Light bottles, like the great Kid Rock with his rifles, and had some choice words for that company. They've lost almost $27 billion in market value. Their sales have plummeted 25% during the second week of May. Reports say the stock price has dropped 18% in May alone. They did so many bad things. The cleanup, the PR effort was bad. It's an American. It's an American kind of icon that has been tarnished to some degree, known as being kind of a blue collar beer, inexpensive way to get out there and have some fun with your buddies. Has now been tarnished. And you see also the video like in baseball stadiums where there's no line at all at the Bud Light concession.
Right.
None. But every other line is full of people trying to buy a beer there, which is also kind of funny. But then Target does its thing too. They take a look at Bud Light and say, we're
going to dip our toe into that.
Hey, hold my beer. Watch us do this. So Go ahead.
It's amazing, right? I think it's not only the issue of the day, right? This whole social justice, and it permeates most of our daily activities wherever we go, and kind of whatever we're doing. We see that, from buying Bud Light or buying beer to going to Target and elsewhere. But I think this is also generational, right? Generational in the sense of, the people, and we certainly saw the marketing individual that was in charge of that Bud Light campaign. That was a different individual that has come up in a time where they think it's okay to actually, enforce your view on others on this front. And I think that's also something that we've got to grapple with, whether that's coming from Bud Light, Target, or really anywhere else. You just want to buy a beer because you want to drink beer. Or I need to go into Target because I got to pick up a shampoo or something else. And I don't need to be, try to be indoctrinated by what's going on in these establishments. And so I think that's really at the heart of this. And I think that's, a lot of Americans kind of just shake their head and like, I just want to go to Target. Just let me go to Target, buy what I need to buy, and get out without having to subject myself or my children. It's
Right.
really the children here to what's going on there, where they're getting confused, and they start thinking a certain way like that. That's where I think a lot of folks, particularly here and elsewhere, kind of say, okay, the line's that line is too far. It's okay if certain people want to do certain things, and that's fine. But when it's front and center, and it's a message that's trying to be sort of like thrown at you every single day, when you're just trying to buy a beverage or go and buy some shampoo, that's a little much.
I want to bring up a quote from Kevin O'Leary, who is also known as Mr. Wonderful.
Oh, Shark Tank, nice.
Yeah, you're Mr. Okay. He's Mr. Wonderful.
Well, I've been called Mr. Wonderful
and Mr. Meh. That's what we call you around the office.
Yeah.
No, he had a quote that was really good. It said, "On one hand, companies want to show their support of diversity and all the mandates that society is discussing openly. On the other hand, the job of a business, particularly from the perspective of an investor, and those that are retired, for example, that own the S&P 500 or own Target stock, are concerned that maybe they're losing their way in terms of what the prime objective is, your customers, your employees, and your shareholders." And that brings up something interesting to me, which is there's a difference between a stockholder and a stakeholder. And I think a lot of these companies have said, look, forget the stockholder, people who are in this company, investing in this company to make money. Let's take a look at what a very tiny sliver of people are demanding we do, and let's kowtow and coddle their desires instead of trying to do what we're meant to do, which is, give people products they want, and by doing so, earn a profit for this company. You mentioned Target, of course. They lost like $10 billion in 10 days.
Oh yeah,
right.
And it continues.
And it continues the downward trend. So, it is. I will say, in one point on the children aspect of it, to be an intellectually honest movement, though, I think the trans movement has to court and market to children, because if they don't, it's an inherent tacit acknowledgement that it's not for everybody. They have to normalize it through the eyes of children so that it's normal at that level. If you take them out of the room, you're saying it's not for you yet. Wait till you're 18, then you can try. No, they want everyone to be okay with it. And one other example, and then I'll turn it to you, is when you watch some of these teachers who are trans in school, and they teach grade school children, and they say things like, I talked about this with my kids in my school, my fourth graders, my third graders, and they said, we love you, we understand, and the person on the camera will be like, and it made me cry because I was so excited people accepted me. Well, of course, when you take it to children who don't have the mental capacity to understand it, you take it to an adult, the adult goes, no, I don't buy into that. You take it to a boardroom and a CEO, well, nowadays the CEO would say, yeah, I agree with you, and we're going to market to your sliver of the community. But it's just a real harmful issue for this country and for our children. And it goes back to the issue, something we push here at America First, which are parents' rights. Yeah. Parents have rights in this country, and they need to start exercising them. So talk about
I think that. Certainly. Let me jump back really quick, because your distinction between a shareholder and a stakeholder, I think, is an important one. it gets us into a different conversation, which we're not going to cover today, which is ESG, right? Which is that social governance that we see a lot of companies being forced into, right? And so whether you talk about BlackRock, Vivek Ramaswamy has a couple of books out on this issue, talking about what is going on from an investor standpoint. And it goes to that Leary quote that you had, which is investors are looking around and saying, this is not helping the stock, the price, and what you're actually supposed to be doing, which is making money. The business is there to make money at the end of the day. And so that's a whole nother issue that we can jump into at the right time. But yeah, parents' rights, to go back to that, this is really, I think, one of the seminal issues of today in our time right now.
Yeah.
It's what's the role of parents? What are their rights in educating, informing, and shaping their children? And what is it that, folks like Target and others are doing to shape that as well? So I think that's it's also a tough topic in the sense of you are speaking to children. These are folks that, by their very nature, children want to get along with everyone. They want everyone to be, welcomed, but they don't know where those boundaries are just yet. And that is the role of parents. And if you try to take the parents out of that and you try to give it to school teachers or administrators or executives at, Bud Light or anywhere else, Target, I think that runs the risk. And I think that's concerning.
And at its core, what in essence teachers who are trying to indoctrinate children are doing is saying, hey, let's keep secrets, me and you, from your parents. That's a weird place, I think, for this country to be in and for this country to accept. So,
yeah, I again, absolutely. So when we talk about parents' rights, or we talk about, with the other issue that has been on the radar here for some time, is men and women's sports. And I think, again, it's kind of within this family of issues that we've been dealing with, and it's certainly something that I know we're going to talk with Coach Lou Holtz about as well. So
he's the best.
Looking forward to that, and I think we'll just jump right into introducing the coach and going from there. So let me bring just a great champion on. Individuals is pushing back against men and women's sports, fighting to protect children, empowering parents, is the one and only, the none other, Coach Lou Holtz. Coach Holtz doesn't really need an introduction, yet I'm going to give him one. Is considered one of the most successful college coaches of all time, serves as the chair for the America First Policy Institute Center for 1776. Extensive career coaching, head coach, not only at the collegiate level, but also in the NFL, worked at ESPN and the like, has a variety of charitable organizations, and all around just a great individual.
Great person.
Someone that you can have an everyday conversation with. All right, Coach, we're going to jump right into it. Obviously, what we're talking about, one topic that's in the news a lot recently is men and women's sports, right? We see that across the country in a variety of different things. You're a legendary coach. You've coached many, many different teams, college, professional. Obviously, you coached men. You didn't coach women's sports, but let's say you did. And you're coaching in this time frame, and you saw, your athletes running up into this problem. How would you approach the issues if you were coaching today that I think some coaches, particularly those coaching women's sports, are having to run into?
Well, the first thing I told our football team that we would not use our team to promote any cause other than the university. We wouldn't use it to promote gay rights, homosexuality, whatever else the case may be. You want to do that as an individual? God bless you. But you aren't going to use our team to do that. I'm an old man. I've been around a long time. Never have I seen so many changes in such a short period of time as I have recently to this country. We've always had people that were different as far as their sexual preference, whatever else the case. But we grew up fine. You go live your life. That's the thing about this country. You go live your life, but let me live my life. But what has happened now, it's gotten to the point where it's not enough for you to go live your life. I've got to approve it. I've got to endorse it. I've got to applaud it. And I've got to congratulate you. I mean, what in the world? Let me live my life. You go live your life. Whatever your sexual preference is, that's up to you. It's not going to affect me whatsoever. But I'm tired of a minority trying to get the majority to say you got to approve it, you got to believe it, and you got to idolize it.
Yeah, Coach, very well said. And I think you hit on something that few people actually realize. It started off as a kind of an acknowledgement movement. Like, hey, just acknowledge we're here, get used to it. Then it was you have to accept everything we do. And now it's an endorsement, is what you just said. And that's absolutely correct in the sense that you have to endorse what all these folks want to do. And any pushback or any common sense, any rationale, any logic, any physics, any biology is ridiculous in their eyes that a man can be a woman can be a man. And I remember I played college tennis at Ole Miss, and I remember Serena Williams sitting down with like David Letterman. David Letterman said, "You could beat men," and she goes, "No, I can't. In fact, I played a guy who wasn't even ranked, and he destroyed me in like 20 minutes." So my point in bringing all of those things up is, like, what do you think the driving force here is to push these men into women's sports?
Well, I look at it overall, and I think it's to destroy the country. When they ask somebody, what is a woman, she can't describe it. To me, a man's a man, a woman, that's my belief. That's my flesh. Don't ask me to accept what you believe. If you want to believe that, God bless you. But I'm going to believe what I know in my heart is right and proper. But you can look at all the things that made this country great. Athletics was certainly one of them because of competitiveness and the camaraderie and the lessons you learn from it. But also the destruction of the family, now the destruction of religion. It goes on, and you go look at Saul Alinsky's playbook on how we bring this country into communism. They're following a game plan particularly accurate.
Well, it's a great point, Coach. Let me just touch on what Hogan said, right? So you've got, but who's the driving force behind this, do you think? Obviously, you coached. Is it the NCAA, or who is it at the end of the day that is making this big push, other than the athletes themselves, right? Other than that man who wants to be at the top of of swimming or whatever it might be in a women's environment. Who is the driving force? Who's the organizing force behind this? That
to me, it's the educational system. I mean, they'll tell you, number one, you get the minds of the young people. You can get them to do anything in this world you want them to do. And with our educational system, that's what we're taught. So many different things that I grew up to believe in and to cherish, love of the country, opportunities, and the freedom to determine your own future. But now it's determined in the academics. They teach young people. You follow, and you just look at the election. The young people are all liberal, all not liberal, right. Ultra liberal. And to me, if that's their choice, but they're going to destroy this country. And I believe that in the bottom of my heart. And I'm going to say it because I feel I have an obligation as a citizen of this United States and as a grandfather to make sure that my grandchildren have the same opportunities I had. And to me, I don't know, we talk about race, we talk about gender, whatever else the case may be. All I say is everybody should have the same opportunities to succeed as I had. I should not have any better opportunity, nor should they have any better opportunity. Give everybody an opportunity to make the choices, wherever we are, good or bad, because the choices we make. But we don't make choices today with the young people. They let other people make them for them.
Yeah, and the education system, I believe, Coach, is in large part to blame. I think you hit on that. All the levers of power and influence are controlled by the left, mostly the radical left. So it's the media, big tech, Hollywood, and colleges and universities. So they, in large part, are pushing these things. But you hit on something there as you see this as beginning to try and destroy America. Problematic as it may be, a poll just came out that showed basically pride in being an American has reached a record low in 2022, with only 38% of adults saying they are, quote unquote, extremely proud to be an American. First of all, why do you think we're seeing this? And you, someone who loves this country, who's done such amazing things to mold the hearts and minds of so many people through your coaching, does that pain you at all to see this?
Let me just say that's an absurdly low percentage. That's crazy.
Yes, it does bother me, but also I think it's obvious. when you have people telling you how bad this country is, all
Yeah.
the things we did, talk about anything positive, that's natural. But here's the other thing I think is when we got away the obligation to serve in the military. If everybody had to serve 1 year in the military, 1 year out of your life, this country would be completely different. You would learn things in the military, lessons that you should have learned. The one thing that I was taught as a youngster was respect, respect for myself, respect for teachers, respect for elders, respect for coaches, respect for the law, and respect for the military. And that was enforced in the school. Now that no longer happens. Many times it's not taught at home. But people don't understand that what made this country great is because people sacrificed to go into the military. I was an officer in the Army, and I got to tell you, I learned more in the military than I ever learned in the college classroom. And if more people were forced to go do that, learn discipline, and the main thing about the military, you learn your obligation to your fellow soldier next to you. You may not want to do something, but you're going to do it because you know you could be jeopardizing his welfare or her welfare.
Yeah, and you're right in the sense too that this is the logical conclusion. If people are taught America is the root of all evil, that we're the cause of the world's problems, then of course they would want to change what America is, and they'd be right to do so if they're under the impression America's so awful. But you take the opposite stance. America still is a beacon of hope and of freedom and of strength and democracy all over the world.
Well, you're going to service. If you're in the 101st Airborne, they're going to teach about all the great accomplishments and pride and things that they have done in this world. But it's like anything else, though. Life's a matter of choices. And we let too many people make the wrong choices, and we condone it. And this thing has gone downhill, and you wonder where in the world is it going to stop? When's it going to stop? And you look at the changes in the last 10 years, so to speak. And now when I find out that they are investigating the Catholic Church because it might be too liberal or whatever. It's because of our faith. Because you have to get rid of religion, and then you take and look. I just read this morning where President Biden approved the ransacking, so to speak, of Mar-a-Lago. That's not right. That's not the way it should be. I just think if we live by three things, if we get people in this country to do three things, that's all. Number one, do what's right. You know the difference between right and wrong. You have now get out the Bible. It's not right to beat up on somebody, or particularly an old man. I see you see it happen all the time. But just do what's right. It's right to be honest, right to be on time, but it's right to be loyal. But being honest. So many people lie and they get away with it on a consistent basis. Nobody's ever called upon it. That's not right. All I want to be able to do is have people I can trust. You can't trust people if they don't tell you the truth or they don't do the right thing. Rule number two, do everything the best of your ability. Not everybody first team. Not everybody be All-America. Not everybody be an A student. But everybody can be the best they're capable of being. And too many times we let people get by with just doing the very bare minimum. And that's not right. And the last rule is show people you care. You're never going to meet anybody again that doesn't need a smile, kind words, encouragement. We all have difficulty. And if you follow those three rules, you build trust, you build a commitment, you build a genuine love for one another. It's not complicated. I believe this for 40-some years. It's never led me wrong.
Well, Coach, those are great. Those are three great principles I think most people probably can get on board with. Let me just go back to a comment. Well, and we talked about some of the weaponization that you mentioned, Biden administration, and a variety of other things. So that's certainly an important topic. One question I wanted to ask you, though, is, right, I've got two young children, and I think when you talk about the youth, right, and you talk about kids growing up, I think kids naturally, because I think they've been taught, they want to make a difference. They want to change things, right? But I think it's important that we're able to show them that you can love your country. You can love what it stands for and all the patriotism. And, of course, what you talk about as being the chair for the Center for 1776 here at AFPI. You can do all that and make a positive change. You don't have to go down this route of, I'm going to make a change because the United States, this country is terrible, and so I want to change it into something worse, right? You can say, it's the best country on earth. Can it be better? Sure, it can be better, and let's change it for the better. And I think that's where a lot of this conversation gets lost a little bit.
I think that somebody makes a mistake when they think I'm going to change something. You don't go about to change it. Change happens because you follow those 3 rules, because you care about people, because you care about a cause. But if you can't trust somebody, when people lie on a consistent basis, I don't have much use for that. Yeah, we're not right all the time. We make mistakes, but above all, let's care about this country. And we have had obligation. I have a family vacation for 34 years. 1 week we go different places. And it's always basically the same. We play golf in the morning, afternoon with the children, evening with the family. 9 o'clock we have a family meeting. One night it's on our foundation. One night it's on our business. One night it's on our religion. God is very important in my life. And I think that people that get away from that are missing a very big part of their life. But then one night I talked to the men about how to treat women. Too many people don't treat women with the respect and the dignity. And I'll tell you, I'm an old man, but one thing I learned, women are the stronger sex in this country, believe me. And that they get more things done. But it's just, I'm going to go do something. I'm going to do it as well as I can. And pretty soon you're going to make a change, and it's going to change the world. But you don't go out and say, I'm going to make a change, because then you end up accomplishing nothing and getting frustrated.
Well, I think speaking of changing, you have changed the hearts and minds of so many kids over the years, so many young men and women, just by your actions, by your coaching style, your words always impart such import to so many different people. But I was down at a AFPI event. I turned around, there was a huge guy behind me in line, had a South Carolina shirt on. Clearly, this guy played athletics, and if he didn't, he missed an opportunity because he was a large individual. And I turned around to him, I said, "Did you play football?" He said, "Yeah, I did." I said, "What years?" And he told me. I said, "Wait a minute, was Coach Holtz your coach?" He said, "Yeah." And I'm going to tell you, he was so great. And he went on for 5-10 minutes about how wonderful you were and all these things. So let's jettison the conversation on all the important topics for a moment. Tell us a fun story or it can be important, it can be impactful, but something in your coaching world, in your coaching life with one of your kids, or something that happened either at Notre Dame, South Carolina, wherever, and just take us kind of behind the scenes with some interactions you guys have had with other players or other coaches or something else.
Almost every player I've ever coached, there's a story behind it. I give you. You mentioned athlete. I give you a story. Let's take Tim Brown. I went to Notre Dame. Tim Brown was third-team receiver. The first practice, I walk off the field. The media's there, and the media wants to, "What do you think?" Well, I hadn't thought about anything, but well, that Tim Brown's a real good athlete. And so he came in the next day because they put it in the paper. He said, "Did you say that, Coach?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Tim, do you have a drug problem? Do you lie, cheat? Wait, what is it about you? Because it's your athletic talents keeping you from being a great football player." He said that conversation changed him. Or Rocket Ishmael. Rocket Ishmael was a great football player. He was a running back in high school, but he wasn't real big, but he had so much speed and open. We made him a wide receiver.
Right.
And about the third game as freshman year, he catches a bomb for a touchdown against Purdue. And the end zone's real close. So he goes in the end zone, he goes down and high fives everybody in the front row. So I had this whistle I whistled to Richmond. I need to see you came over. I said, "Rocket, if you want to sit in the stands, I'll get you a ticket. You play football, you score, you come over here. You don't go be a no, you decide whether you want to be a spectator, whether you want to be a player, but you ain't going to do both." Never had another problem with him along that line. It's just everybody. Jerome Bettis, I can tell stories forever about him. I was tough on all of them. Now, you mentioned that player had great things to say about if I was murdered, the police would never investigate it because everybody been a suspect. I was tough. I was demanding. I didn't need a friend. And Woody Hayes told me in coaching, you want a friend by a dog. Your obligation to make them the very best they can possibly be. And I did that. I make no excuse or apology. But I also told him this: you do what I ask you to do for 4 years, I'll do what you ask me to do for the next 40. Now, thank God the 40 are almost up because they're running me down. But you have to have a faith and belief. And let me tell you something. People change. If I coached today, I'd have coached a little differently in this respect. What you say to a young person today is important, but it's not near as important as your facial expression. Your facial expression is not near as important as your tone of voice. When a guy screws up, you don't scream and holler. I mean, they're so, they just feel that you attack them and they withdraw and they won't, they're insecure. Whereas I was coached by a guy who 5 years before was at Iwo Jima. Oh, don't tell me about that broken finger. Get in there. That was the way life was, but they're different. What you say is important, but not near as important as your facial expression, your tone of voice. And the better you get, the softer you speak, the more you smile. Jim, that was a bad thing to do. You have no idea how mad I am. But, you're going to find out tomorrow that we just don't do things that way here. We don't tolerate that. So, I mean, you have to adjust. You have to change. But people have changed today. And I think the fact that we don't have a commitment to somebody, we're not forced to follow up on something, it hurts us in the long run.
Well, thank you so much for sharing those stories. And we just have a couple minutes left here, but you kind of are using that adage, you speak softly but carry a big stick, is what I'm hearing you. And speaking of that, that was a politician who said it. So if you would, can you give us a story of any politician you dealt with, anything funny there as well? Take us behind the scenes with that too, if you could. Don't want to put you on the spot, but
I've been blessed to be around a lot of great politicians, and I think I've had dinner with 6 different presidents, et cetera. But,
wow.
I'm in Arkansas. We're going to play Oklahoma. They're number 1 in the country. And I had to suspend 3 athletes, scored 78% of our touchdowns. So they take me to court. And because I stayed employed, the attorney general from Arkansas said I could represent you. His name was Bill Clinton.
Wow.
Later went on to become president. He did a great job. I won the case. But it's like anything else. Whether it was President Reagan or President Bush or President Clinton, they're like anybody else. They make mistakes, they have flaws, etc. Don't expect people to be perfect or be better. But more importantly, is I've tried to teach our athletes, the main thing I've tried to teach my children, life is about choices. Wherever you are, good or bad, because the choice you make. Choose to do drugs, drop out of school, join a gang, get tattooed from head to bottom, get arrested. You choose to have difficulty in life, and stop blaming me for the choices you make. So I just try to get them to make good choices. You follow the 3 rules I mentioned, you always make good choices.
Well, Coach, those are that's words to live by, basically. That's great advice. Those core principles, the 3 rules, I think that would go a long way if folks would actually practice some of that in today's age. So, look, we want to thank you for being with us, spending some time, parting some of your wisdom. It's great always catching up with you, and thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm humbled to be here, and all I try to do is speak from my heart. You may agree or may not agree, but that's the great thing about this country. It's your choice.
Well, what a blessing. Thanks so much, Coach. Really appreciate it. Thanks for all the work you did for your service and everything else. Thank you. Really do appreciate it. God
Thank
bless.
you, but I'm not done yet. I have a lot more to do
well, that's
with America's First policy.
There we go.
Thank you, Coach. Have a great day.
Thank you.
That was absolutely incredible. Lou Holtz is someone I used to watch on the sidelines as a kid. And in fact, when he was coaching at Arkansas, he mentioned that toward the end. I was living in Arkansas at the time, and I actually met him when I was 3 years old. My dad had me at the golf course on the putting green. I don't remember it. I doubt he would remember that. I didn't want to bring that up. But still, he's been around that long, and being able to have conversations with so many young men and mold them the way he has with the value set that he has in his heart, I think is just, it permeates for generations. It really does help shape this country in a positive way.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, when you listen to his stories and stories with his athletes, but also just his sort of what he believes, I find myself shaking my head, right? Saying, and like, yes, that's what we need more of. That's what we need more of. And, I mentioned I've got 2 sons who are teenagers growing up, and, talking to them, I talk to him about, his 3 core principles in a different way. And you could kind of tell it doesn't come their first thing that they think about. I mean, they've got all these other influences and TikTok and social media and all these different things. It's a different time than obviously when I grew up, certainly when you grew up, because you're much older than I am. Certainly. And so it's interesting, but I think there's a lot of value that can come from his wisdom, his stories, his background, and his experiences.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty obvious. Any player I mentioned in the interview, a player I met, I mean, you should have seen the guy's face light up. He was so nice and so enthusiastic about Coach Holtz, had nothing but nice things to say about him. And every time I've heard a player that he coached talk about their experience with Coach Holtz, it's always in a positive way. And it's more than just about football. That's what I think matters most here. And look, he wanted to win games and won a ton of them at Arkansas, Notre Dame, South Carolina. But at the same time, it's about winning in life. And I think he gave them the tools to do that in so many ways. And so what a cool thing to be able to work with him today, but also get to hear those stories and do this podcast.
And one thing we didn't touch a lot on, but he does a lot of work for AFPI, is in that Center for 1776. And what does it mean to have that patriotic education back in our school systems, back where, really the young folks are starting to learn that at a very young age and can take that with them as they grow up and as they have children. So we didn't talk a lot about that, but he does a lot of important work here at AFPI. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today on The Tank. Make sure that you subscribe so you don't miss out on any of our upcoming episodes. We'll be releasing them every other week, discussing real issues with America First solutions.
Text the word TANK to 70107. That's TANK to 70107 to get exclusive content from the Tank podcast and to learn more about the America First Policy Institute.